Dawn broke over the rainforest in waves of liquid gold, filtering through the interlaced canopy and setting every leaf aglow with a wet, verdant sheen. Beneath the towering kapok and sabo trunks, the air trembled with the hum of insects and the distant roar of a hidden waterfall. It was here, among a tangle of lianas and clambering vines, that Kiri the capuchin monkey found herself alone and broken, her small body pressed against the rough bark of an ancient strangler fig. Pain seared through her right arm, where a jagged claw had raked her flesh, and each shallow breath tasted of fear and the sharp tang of blood. The world around her, so often a playground of swinging branches and glittering fruit, had become a treacherous maze of snapping vines and patrolling predators. Kiri's dark eyes, wide with panic, scanned the impenetrable green for any hint of her troop. A familiar cry, a flicker of russet fur, the reassuring brush of another monkey's hand. But all that answered was the soft rustle of falling seed pods and the mournful cry of a lone howler in the distance. She tried to clutch the vine above her with her good arm, only to wince as the pain stabbed anew. Instinct drove her to move, but every effort to leap to the next branch sent shockwaves through her injured limb. Below lurked the forest floor's deadly secrets, venomous snakes coiled in the leaf litter, jaguars scenting the air for fallen prey, and peccaries that stamped their way through the undergrowth, maddened by hunger. Kiri felt the jungle close in around her, a living beast ready to devour any weakness. High above, on a crooked branch draped in moss and epiphytes, sat Cora, the scarlet macaw. Her crimson and gold plumage flared like a living torch against the emerald gloom. She had watched Kiri's fall from the safety of her aerial perch, heart hammering as the monkey tumbled through the branches. Though birds seldom meddled in the affairs of primates, Cora felt a tug of kinship, perhaps born of the many days she had flown alongside troops of capuchins in search of Brazil nuts and wild figs. As dawn's first beams splintered through the canopy, Cora tilted her head, keen eyes tracking the trembling silhouette clinging to the tree trunk. She recognized pain in those glassy eyes, understood abandonment in the monkey's silent plea, and so, with a decisive flap of iridescent wings that scattered droplets of dew into the air, Cora launched herself into the shafts of morning light, determined to offer whatever aid a flying creature could muster. The rainforest shifted around her as she descended, a cathedral of green where every twist of a branch and every flicker of a butterfly's wings held significance. Cora wheeled through columns of vines, wings arcing above ferns drenched in mist, until she came within a few yards of Kiri's battered form. She landed lightly on a stout liana, tilting her head in a gesture of gentle reassurance. The monkey's eyes, red-rimmed and glistening, widened further as the macaw's melodious trill filled the hollow. Cora's voice was a soft echo of encouragement, a promise that she would not leave Kiri in her hour of need. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the rainforest's steady pulse. Then, with a cautious twist, Kiri inched closer to the trunk, her good arm quivering as she reached out toward Cora. The macaw cooed again, her feathers undulating in a rhythmic dance of invitation. She knew the way. In that exchange, the shining trust in Kiri's dark eyes and the unwavering beat of Cora's brilliant wings, a fragile alliance was born. And though neither could foresee the perils ahead, the labyrinth of flooded gullies, the hidden cliffs, the relentless predators, the miracle of that dawn lay in a single truth. Together, bird and monkey would navigate the jungle's vast, green expanse, driven by a compass of hope that no wound, no distance, and no odds could ever extinguish. The early morning mist clung to every vine and leaf as Kiri mustered the courage to move again, each swing of her uninjured arm demanding a fierce effort against the dull ache that pulsed through her shoulder. Above her, Cora alighted on a broad, moss-slick branch and tilted her head, emitting a soft, insistent trill that served as both encouragement and compass. With trembling limbs, Kiri inched down the strangler fig's smooth bark, fingertips seeking purchase in the smallest crevices as her injured arm brushed against rough patches, sending fresh waves of pain through her bones. Beneath her, the forest floor lay hidden in shadow, a tapestry of tangled roots and slick leaves that threatened every misstep with a crushing fall. Yet with each careful descent, she felt Cora's presence above, an iridescent beacon guiding her path. Once Kiri's feet found the thick litter of detritus below, she paused to steady her breathing. The humming chorus of cicadas had given way to the muted roar of the river, deep in the gorge, and somewhere to the east, the thunder of cascading water promised both danger and sanctuary. Cora fluttered down to a low branch and tapped it twice with her beak, as if pointing to the narrow, beaten trail that cut through the undergrowth toward the sound. Summoning her resolve, Kiri lurched forward, vines parting at her sides, her good arm brushing aside tendrils heavy with dew. Every breath was steamy and sweet with the scent of earth. Every heartbeat carried the echo of fear she refused to own. They traveled in companionable silence, broken only by Cora's occasional chirp. As they pressed into the thicker jungle, massive buttress roots rose like natural staircases, and Kiri used them to lift her weight, each footfall a whisper on the damp wood. She stumbled when the root gave way to mud, but Cora swooped low, wings beating a soft warning that diverted her back onto firmer ground. A troop of howler monkeys bellowed in the distance, their deep calls rumbling through the canopy and spurring Kiri's panic. If her family heard her cries, how would they know where to find her? Yet the macaw's steady presence quelled her rising dread, and she pressed on, guided by the scarlet flash overhead. At the riverbank, the tumult of white water slammed against stone, spray arcing into the air like liquid diamonds. The old vine bridge, woven generations ago by spider monkeys, hung in tatters above the torrent, planks missing, ropes frayed. Kiri's heart sank. This was her only way across. Cora landed on the nearest vine, rasped at the tattered ropes, and then soared above the bridge's far end, urging Kiri forward with urgent clicks. Gathering her courage, Kiri tested the first rotten plank with her good foot. It groaned but held. Inch by excruciating inch she crossed, arms wrapped around the vine handrail, the river's roar filling her ears. A plank collapsed behind her, plunging into the swirl below, but she did not dare look back. With a final, shuddering leap of faith, she reached the far bank, jealousy of Cora's easy flight replaced by a fierce pride in her own battered triumph. Their journey continued through a grove of flowering heliconias, bright orange and crimson trumpets that dripped with nectar. The muggy, sweet aroma filled Kiri's nostrils, and she sank to a knee to lap at a fallen bloom, the cool liquid a temporary balm for her parched throat. Cora perched nearby, preening her brilliant feathers as though to remind Kiri to gather strength for the trials ahead. Even as the undergrowth thickened again, the Capuchin found new reserves of determination in that simple act of hydration. Later, they reached the base of a fallen log that spanned a ravine too deep to descend. Moss and ferns carpeted its surface, and Kiri sat at one end, craning to measure the distance. She glanced up to find Cora perched at the opposite rim, bright eyes urging her onward. With a trembling exhale, Kiri launched herself onto the log, arms splayed for balance. Each forward lunge sent a tremor through the rotten wood. Each heartbeat pounded in her ears. Midway, a gnarled branch threatened to snag her sleeve, but she pressed on, boots scraping bark until her shaking legs carried her to solid earth once more. By midday, the forest opened onto a sunlit glade where her troop's familiar calls drifted on a breeze scented with ripe figs. Kiri stood at the edge, chest heaving, tears brimming in her eyes as she recognized the shapes of her kin moving among the trees. Cora dropped onto a low branch and let out a triumphant squawk that echoed like a heralding trumpet. Hearing the macaw's cry, Kiri's troop bounded forward. Her sister chattered in relief, her brothers circled protectively, and her mother rushed to gather her in a trembling embrace. Through it all, Cora flew a lazy loop overhead, bright plumage glinting in the sun as she vanished into the canopy, her work complete. In that moment of reunion, Kiri pressed her good arm against her chest. feeling the dull throb of her wound as a hero's scar. She glanced upward, offering a grateful chitter into the sky. The jungle's vast, living cathedral seemed to exhale around her. Every bird call and leaf rustle, a hymn of thanks to the miracle macaw that had led her home against all odds. The heat of midday had given way to a sudden hush as Alder, the Capuchin, Kiri by name, pressed her injured arm against her chest and followed Cora's trailing scarlet wings deeper into the emerald gloom. The forest closed around them in a cathedral of vines, roots twisting like sleeping serpents across the earthen floor. Each step pulled a chorus of creaks and crept as branches slick with moss surrendered underfoot. Kiri's breath came ragged, the dull hammer of pain pulsing from her arm with every heartbeat, yet she refused to falter, driven onward by the macaw's unwavering confidence. They came at last upon a shallow glade where the sunlight dappled through a knotted tangle of strangler fig roots. Here, the air hummed with insects, their wings beating in frenzied patterns that shimmered in the half-light. Kiri paused at the edge, afraid to disturb the cloud of leaf-cutter ants streaming over fallen fruit and decaying wood. Cora lighted on a nearby limb and clicked softly, encouraging her forward. Summoning courage, Kiri tested a path through the ant highway, careful to avoid their biting columns. Each footfall was a measured risk. One careless step could unleash a torrent of jaws, but the macaw's gentle coos guided her between patches of open earth. And at last, she cleared the swarm, tiny specks of amber dust dancing in her wake. Beyond the ants lay the next trial, a slick slope of rain-smoothed mud where a hidden root clung to the bank like a lifeline. Kiri's good arm wrapped around the root's coarse fibers as she lowered herself inch by inch, claws scrabbling for purchase. The mud threatened to suck her down with every movement, but Cora perched above, flaring her wings in bright arcs that caught the light and drew Kiri's gaze upward, an unspoken reminder that danger could be met with hope. With a final, trembling push, Kiri slid to solid ground and fell back against a tangle of ferns, breathless but unbowed. As the forest shifted to the gold of late afternoon, they arrived at the foot of an immense kapok tree, whose swollen roots formed a natural staircase spiraling upward. The distant thunder of the waterfall had grown closer, a promise of both water and the safety of Kiri's troop. Though twilight would soon swirl the jungle into waiting shadows, the macaw's keen eye and unwavering song guided Kiri along each route, upward toward the canopy's opening. With every careful step, Kiri felt the comforting strength of Cora's brilliant wings above her, an impossible alliance of bird and monkey, forging a path home against all odds. The afternoon sun filtered through a lattice of lianas and high-arching fronds as Cora flitted between shafts of golden light, guiding Kiri toward the roar of the hidden falls. Kiri's injured arm throbbed with each careful swing through the undergrowth, but she pressed on, heart buoyed by the macaw's unwavering song. Suddenly, the path opened into a small clearing, where a shallow pool lay rimmed by smooth, water-worn stones, its surface broken only by the gentle spill of a trickling spring. Beneath the mossy boughs, Cora alighted on a low branch and trilled insistently, dipping her head toward the water's edge. Kiri approached and knelt, cupping her good hand to drink, then splashed cool water over her wound. Silver droplets ran down her fur, mingling with the scarlet trickle of fresh blood. Pain lanced through her side, but she pressed her wounded arm against the bathing stream, letting the clear water sluice away grit and grime. As Kiri tended her injury, Cora darted away into a thicket of broad-leafed helenias, returning with handfuls of soft, bright green leaves. The macaw dropped them at Kiri's feet, tapping them gently with her beak. Instinct told Kiri these were healing leaves, the same bitter tang she had tasted days before when her troop used them on a sick companion. She crushed the foliage between her palms, then pressed the warm, pulpy mash into the jagged cut on her arm. A soothing warmth spread through her nerves as the leaves' juices began to staunch the flow of blood. Encouraged by the immediate relief, Kiri pressed fresh layers of pulp into the wound, then wrapped it with broad strips of bark Cora had peeled from a fallen branch. The macaw watched with bright eyes, offering soft chirps of approval as Kiri bound the dressing firmly yet gently. Rejuvenated by the healing spring and Cora's ministrations, Kiri felt new strength surging through her limbs. She rose to her feet just as the sun began its slow descent, painting the glade in a warm amber glow. Cora swooped down and landed on Kiri's shoulder, her sharp talons probing for purchase, and together they set off once more toward the thunder of water. The forest canopy grew denser as they followed a narrow game trail carved by trooping monkeys. Each step brought them closer to home. Finally, through a curtain of hanging moss, they glimpsed the great waterfall, a curtain of mist and white thunder plunging into a crystalline pool. Echoing across the plunging water, voices rose, the familiar chatter of Kiri's troop cascading over stone and fern. Tears stung Kiri's eyes as she broke into a run, her wounded arm held close to her side. Cora circled above, her brilliant plumage a comet against the emerald walls of the gorge. Branches whipped past as Kiri raced, heart pounding, until she burst into the troop's eager embrace. Sisters tumbled at her feet, chattering in disbelief. Her mother pressed Kiri's bandaged arm to her own chest, soft sniffs mingling with Kiri's sobs of relief. Cora landed on a broad root above the reunion, tilting her head in silent farewell. As the troop gathered around to nuzzle and chatter at the fallen hero, Kiri looked skyward and offered a grateful chitter into the fading light, the miracle macaw's guiding beacon still shining in her heart. Kiri's reunion with her troop was a tumult of soft cries and frantic embraces, yet amid the joyful chaos, her injured arm drew anxious stares. Her mother, Perla, pressed a gentle hand to Kiri's wound, murmuring soothing trills that nestled in Kiri's heart like a lullaby. The younger siblings scampered around, chattering questions about the scarlet bird who had led her home, while the elder Capuchins clustered close, their dark eyes alight with relief and curiosity. When Perla finally helped Kiri to her feet, the troop formed a protective circle as one of the older females produced a handful of honey-soaked termites, a prized delicacy known for both nourishment and mild antiseptic quality. Kiri's fingers trembled as she accepted the offering, each tiny, sweet insect a reminder of home's bounty. Around her, murmurs of approval rippled through the group as they shared their finds: purple passion fruit from a nearby vine, plump figs that dripped ruby juice, and pale orchid bulbs, prized for their soothing sap. Each morsel passed between them carried a silent message: "You are safe, and we will care for you." High above, Cora flitted from branch to branch, her vibrant feathers catching shards of afternoon light as she watched the monkey circle below. The troop's leader, Juma, raised his hand in a respectful salute, and Kiri extended her good arm in return, a gesture of profound gratitude that transcended the differences between bird and primate. In that moment, the forest held its breath. Even the distant howler monkeys paused in their nightly chorus to witness the bond forged by courage and compassion. As dusk's violet veil fell across the canopy, the troop began its slow ascent to the communal roost, a sprawling network of interwoven branches and leafy platforms, woven high into the tallest kapok trees. Perched on her mother's shoulder, Kiri felt the throbbing ache of her wound dulled by warmth and fellowship, each step accompanied by gentle rubs and whispered reassurances. Cora led the way, floating just ahead to guide the troop's path, her bright calls echoing like a living lantern through the gloom. Whenever a branch wobbled or a gap appeared in the trail, she would hover, wings beating a steady drumbeat until Kiri or another monkey found safe purchase. Reaching the roost, Juma issued a low-warning trill to keep predators at bay, and the troop settled onto their individual platforms. Kiri's mother arranged a nest of pliant vines and soft moss for her injured daughter, tucking Kiri in with tender precision. Cora lighted on a nearby stub and cleaned her beak with a single graceful flick, then offered Kiri a final, comforting trill before settling her own feathers. As fireflies kindled their lights across the surrounding leaves, the troop's younger members drifted into sleep, their breathing a synchronized lullaby. In the hush that followed, Kiri traced the contours of her bandaged arm by the flicker of bioluminescent fungi, marveling at the journey she had taken, from the edge of despair to the safety of her family, guided by a miracle macaw's unwavering trust. Cora leaned close, her great head tilting so that Kiri could feel the soft brush of her crest against a knuckle. The two shared a silent moment of understanding, a promise that no matter where the canopy's wind might carry them tomorrow, they would always have each other's path to follow. And so, under a mosaic of starlight and rustling leaves, monkey and macaw, capuchin and bird of the emerald wilds, drifted into dreams, bound together by the forest's living spine, by shared peril and triumph, and by the unbreakable compass of courage that had led a tiny badger's scarlet friend through the heart of the jungle to bring her home. The next morning, a gentle mist drifted through the canopy, softening the golden light of dawn into a diffuse glow that bathed the troop's roost in warmth and promise. Kiri awoke to the faint tremble of the branches beneath her feet, the distant chorus of toucans and parrots weaving through the hush. Her arm, once raw and pulsing with pain, now throbbed only with a dull ache, a testament to her healing and the tender ministrations of her family. Carefully, she unwrapped the final layer of bark and leaf from her makeshift bandage, revealing a scab that gleamed like polished amber in the dawn. She flexed her fingers with cautious delight as her mother watched with proud, glistening eyes. Below, Cora circled above the great trees, a scarlet sentinel against the soft green sky. At the first glimmer of Kiri's freed limb, she swooped down in a joyous arc, talons outstretched in greeting. Kiri leaned over the roost's mossy rail and held out her palm, where the macaw lighted with a bright trill. Their eyes met in a wordless exchange of gratitude, a bond sealed by the trials they had endured together. As Kiri cradled a handful of ripe figs, she shared them with the macaw, offering one to Cora's sharp beak before gathering a few for herself. The sweetness of the fruit, still cool with morning dew, was a celebration of life renewed. When the troop began its descent to the forest floor, Kiri and Cora led the way side by side. Each step was a careful dance, Kiri swinging lightly from vine to trunk, arms steady and true, while Cora hopped between branches above, guiding the troop along hidden game trails only she could perceive. They paused at a crystal-clear spring where leaf litter collected like confetti along its edges. Kiri knelt to drink, letting the cool water wash over her scar, and Cora fluttered low, catching droplets on her feathers, then shaking them in joyful flakes. Around them, orchids and bromeliads bloomed in vivid splashes of color, and a pair of ocelots slunk by in silent curiosity, pausing to regard the unlikely duo before melting back into the dappled shadows. By midday, they emerged into a sunlit clearing that opened onto a broad ledge overlooking the river valley. There, the rest of the troop greeted them with jubilant cries, chattering news of their journey's end and the miraculous guidance that had carried them through. Kiri's little brothers scampered forward to clamber onto her shoulders, while the elders offered garlands of woven vines as tokens of respect. Cora rose above them in a shimmering spiral, her brilliant wings catching the sun like living fire. As the troop gathered to feast on bananas and cocoa pods, Kiri leaned back against a sturdy root and watched her family laugh and share, her heart full. And high above, the scarlet macaw perched on a twisted branch, a silent guardian whose unerring compass had led a lost capuchin home. Proof that, in the boundless green of the jungle, friendship and courage could chart a path through the most impossible wilds. The morning sun climbed higher, drenching the river valley in warm light that danced through the emerald canopy and turned every droplet on the leaves into a tiny prism. Kiri moved among her troop with a newfound confidence. Each swing of her arms and leap between branches, executed with a grace born of both relief and triumph. Her scarred limb, once so fragile, now hung strong at her side, its healing scar a badge of survival. As the troop wove through the flowering undergrowth toward the grove that had always promised safety and food, Kiri paused at the edge of a cliff that overlooked the winding river below. The roar of rapids echoed like distant laughter, and in that vast panorama of green and gold, she felt the full, heart-pounding wonder of the jungle's immensity and her place within it. Above her, Cora circled lazily on thermals, her scarlet wings fanning the breeze in slow, majestic arcs. When she dipped in perfect synchronicity to alight on the branch beside Kiri, the Capuchin reached out a trembling hand, offering a ripe, honeyed fig as thanks. Cora accepted with a soft click of her beak, tearing the fruit in half and dropping one half into Kiri's waiting palm. Their eyes met in a quiet conversation older than words, a pact of friendship sealed by shared peril and miraculous guidance. A soft chorus of bird calls swelled around them as the forest awakened fully, and for a moment, Kiri felt the pulse of life in the trees, the vines, even in the stone of the cliff itself. The troop gathered at Kiri's side, and Perla, her mother, slipped an arm around her daughter's shoulders in a tender embrace. Brothers and sisters pressed close, their chatter a jubilant roar that filled the clearing with warmth. They offered Kiri garlands woven from bright heliconia blossoms and draped her in fragrant vines heavy with dew, each bloom a silent testament to her courage. Cora watched from a nearby bough, her head tilted as though in approval, and Kiri raised a hand in farewell to the bird who had flown thousands of shadowed miles to bring her home. The macaw preened in reply, shimmering like a living ember against the green wood. As the troop set off along the familiar trail back to their sleeping hollows, Cora flew above them one last time, calling out in a crystalline trill that echoed against the cliff walls. The monkeys chattered their thanks in return, voices carried away on the breeze. When the path wound too narrow even for her wings, Cora landed on a stout vine and leaned forward, brushing Kiri's cheek with her feathered crest. There was no more need for words. Each knew the other's heart. Then, with a final graceful flap, the macaw lifted skyward and vanished into the lattice of branches, leaving Kiri to watch her brilliant silhouette shrink among the leaves until she became a single red spot against the sky. Kiri turned back to her family, heart full of gratitude and a fierce joy that would carry her through every storm yet to come. The jungle's songs rose around her once more. Toucan laughter, parrot cries, the steady drum of tree frogs marking the rhythm of life. And as the troop disappeared into the dappled green, Kiri felt the steady beat of her own heart, strong and unbroken, guiding her forward on the next great adventure that awaited beneath the living cathedral of the rainforest.